Welcome to What's Next, and it's such a great pleasure. I don't know if you watched the other episodes we had from the Standard Bank series. We looked at different aspects of the business, and it was really interesting to look at the bank and how it operates across different sectors. Today, we're privileged to have with us Timothy Matlala, who heads up public sector at Standard Bank. Really good to see you, Timothy.
Good to see you.
I see you got blue. I've got blue. You know, we got to match with the brand today.
Absolutely. No,
It's really, really nice to see you. You've got such an interesting portfolio. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah.
And I want to ask, let's start off with the big picture, right? Because when we talk about public sector, we talk about government and all the government businesses. And I mean, they make a massive part of the economy that needs to be banked. Why is it important for banks to basically rethink how they engage and how they manage the public sector in today's economic climate?
Yeah, well, Aki, the public sector, and I think local government in particular, provides essential services to communities, and also contributes towards the socio-economic development of these communities. And I think for us, it's about how we partner with them to deliver that important mandate. I'm sure you'd know that the sector in itself confronts a lot of challenges, where it ranges from financial management, there's issues around audit outcomes, there's issues around service delivery. So ours is just really making sure that outside of the traditional banking services of providing a customer with a transactional account, a loan and an investment account, how else do we contribute meaningfully to this sector so that we enable and support them to deliver on the mammoth task of improving the livelihoods of citizens?
No, it's actually so critical because, look at a city like Johannesburg or Pretoria, for example. And I mean, if that's not run efficiently, if they don't have access to funding, the ripple effect on everybody, including residents and businesses, it can really affect those businesses economically. So it's important that they have the right facilities and the banking is running fluid, right?
No, absolutely. And you're touching on something very important because we are community members of these municipalities.
Exactly.
Our businesses are in these municipalities. So that is why we've actually adopted a mantra within my area that says we serve the sector that serves us.
Okay.
And that brings about a profound sense of purpose in how we show up on a daily basis.
Okay.
Yes, we're not going to solve all the problems of the local municipalities, but we need to show up in a way that demonstrates that we appreciate the pressures and we are able to contribute however way we can.
So I often hear you speaking about beyond banking, and I'm trying to imagine what does beyond banking look like? I mean, can you paint a picture for us? In your mind, at Standard Bank, what does that beyond banking look like?
Yeah, so I think in answering that question, Aki, firstly, we need to recognize our core function. And our core function is around making sure that local government, provincial governments, all the PFMA and MFMA entities are properly set up, capacitated with transacting abilities, able to solve and mitigate for some risk elements. But I think beyond that, it's really about the alignment and collaboration around strategic objectives. And that is beyond banking for us in public sector. It's about how well do you appreciate and understand the challenges that your clients face and how well do you use what you've got available within the organization. Here we're talking about some solutions that we have in enterprise development and supplier development. How do we think about businesses doing business with municipalities, right? It's about solving for the entire ecosystem and not just the one client, but making sure that everybody is able to execute on their mandates.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I think every business has its own challenges, and it sounds to me like you're seeing, the public sector as a business, and so you should, because they're banking, they're transacting, etc., etc. But the realities on the ground, when you look at the public sector, in some sectors, there's poor auditing. You hear of financial management constraints. There's infrastructure delays. I mean, they've got their own challenges. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
How do you at Standard Bank plug into those challenges and assist those departments to make those challenges non-challenges?
Well, I'm going to start with what we have to do at a basic level.
Yeah.
We have to do what we must do exceptionally well. Transactional services must be flawless. They must mitigate the risks around financial constraints, because some of the financial mismanagement elements are as a result of not properly set up type of transacting platforms.
Right.
So if we can solve for that and solve for things as basic as reconciliation, the collection, revenue collection capabilities that we offer to these clients, then after all of that, we're able to say, look, we are a financial institution and we have expertise in finance. How do we bring that to a customer in a form of a value proposition that says, outside of banking services, how do we bring our own core skills as finance people to solve for your own challenges? I mean, one of the data points is around what Auditor General published in the last MFMA report, which spoke about some outsourcing of accounting services at a local government level, lack of reporting, right? So there's a great emphasis on finance as a capability. So what we are doing is looking at our own expertise as finance people. We have packaged together an offering, we call it Learning as a Service. Okay. There we go to customers and say, we are finance, let's work with your finance teams to, one, identify some pressure points from your financial ratios, and also share with you best practices on how those can be improved, and also connect you with your peers, because we've explored this in likes of Free State, where leveraging the DDM model, the district model, we've been able to bring local municipalities of one district in one room and worked through the numbers. And as a result, that platform allowed peers to engage and share best practices on how to improve governance.
Yeah, look, it's such a sensitive issue, isn't it? When you look at, for example, that the fact that municipalities really struggle with capacity and capability and everything, which we know. And I mean, sometimes we also need to cut them a little bit of slack, because if you look at how these cities have grown, and how infrastructure has grown, for example. But having said that, your team needs to support those municipalities, right? And there's that fine line that you don't want to overstep the public and the private, mandates that you have.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that fine line?
Well, it's about, firstly, being local. And with that, I mean, you need to have people who are citizens of municipalities to work with the local municipalities.
Okay.
So we are locally represented across all provinces. Even with the local municipalities themselves, they will have access to someone local that is particularly and specifically trained to deal public sector.
Okay.
It's a very specialized area.
So that's what they focus on, specifically public sector
they
only.
are dedicated to public sector. That is why, even from my role as a person responsible for this strategy, we have a team of specialists.
Okay.
We've actually brought in practitioners from local municipalities and turned them into bankers.
Wow.
Because with that,
because they understand the business.
They bring in that level of understanding. So I've been a banker my entire life. I've learned public sector through my work. But there's someone who was a CFO of a local municipality that have spent the entire life of their life, rather, working on local municipalities. How do we bring in these two areas together and package something impactful and relevant for our local municipalities?
That's so interesting. So you get a completely different perspective. You see it from the outside and from the inside.
Absolutely.
And I guess that solves a lot of challenges when you have somebody that knows what that department in the public sector needs, how you as the bank can help solve that. But the reality is as well, Timothy, is that there's lots of competition out there.
Yeah.
How does Standard Bank, how are you unique in your offering when you talk about, traditional commercial banking, which is out there? There's other big players, specifically in the public sector section, where you've got lots of public sector clients. They're represented by other banks. What makes Standard Bank so unique?
Yeah, I think At the core of our differentiation with other competitors, it's the intentionality about the work that we do. And the element I just raised now, Aki, about the specialized skills that we have really gives us the right foundation to solve for the sector. That's the first thing. Quite deliberate about building the internal knowledge and skill around the sector.
Yeah.
Specific to the sector, and I'm sure you would have spoken to some of my colleagues as well. We're quite deliberate about having sectors and having the level of speciality happening in those sectors so that we are relevant to those particular markets.
So like, for example, like public works, you'd have a specialist that would understand engineering and that sort of thing.
We've got a division that looks at energy, infrastructure, mining as a whole. And again, what becomes important is the collaboration that happens within the organization itself. There's a colleague of mine that looks after healthcare. There's a colleague of mine that looks after education sector. How do I get closer to them in solving for public sector, local municipalities and provincial governments? Because there would be those, linkages amongst the different sectors. So that's quite important for us. The second thing is the issue of presence that I highlighted earlier on, Aki. It's very, very important. Public sector customers want to engage with someone in their locality. They want to see someone every day. Gone are the days where when we've got problems, it's always head office that comes through to solve a problem. People locally must appreciate the challenges that the clients are facing, and that way they're able to really get everybody within the organization to rally behind them in providing those impactful solutions. The third thing for me, I think that is a quite important, differentiator is that the strategic objectives of our customers is no longer about ourselves. It's no longer about our profits. It's no longer about the balances that we hold from these entities. It's about what are their strategic focus areas. Every single year, we have to immerse ourselves in understanding a state of national address, or the state of province address. Sometimes you get local municipalities that will also have state of, local sort of municipality or city address. Once you understand the priorities of that particular entity at that local level, then we align ourselves in terms of the deliverables for the year to deliver in partnerships with those customers. And I think the last thing is also just thinking about beyond municipalities and thinking about small businesses, right? We're quite intentional about how we solve for small businesses that historically had challenges and even today are not able to access funding in a normal course of business. So we've got those unconventional solutions that help them to deliver. We've built mechanisms together with our public sector clients to safeguard our interests and also the client's interest. And then we fund them and support them on the projects that they have to deliver for the public sector. And I think lastly, it's also about thinking about the communities, which is at the core of government in essence. Their core job is to improve livelihoods. So we partnered with our clients in some areas where we've built houses for child-headed homes and revamped libraries, build schools and so forth. And that, for me, that's the core of the work that we have to do. Ultimately, should be about the citizens of the country.
And at the end of the day, you talk about the citizens. Once you get all of those basics right, the economic value that it will unlock and the effect that it will have on the GDP long term, I get what you're saying about the fact that it's long term. So if the municipalities operate efficiently, they've got access to finance, they're running efficiently, that in turn will unlock additional value into the economy in terms of the GDP. But earlier we were talking about the different departments that you guys serve, and I was fascinated by that. Can you talk to us about the scale of your department and the different sectors that you different sectors or clients that you actually typically would deal with in your portfolio, and the kinds of projects? Because you said healthcare, we spoke about public work. So if, for example, you listened to the budgets, which I'm sure you did, and the president spoke about we're going to build X amount of bridges or this is going to be upgraded, would they come to you and say, look, this is the bridge, this is how much it's going to cost? Is that how it works?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much how it works. So our clients, which is the first part of your question, broken down into like 4 categories.
Yes.
One, it's at a national level where you've got government entities, various government entities. I often refer to them as just PFMA entities or MFMA entities. Here we're talking about your entities like liquor boards, gambling boards,
Lotto, etc.
Exactly. Anything that is governed by the Public Finance Management Act would form part of our client base. And of course, that is broken down according to schedules that is published by National Treasury from 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, and all the way to D. And outside of that, we also have provinces. That will be our clients. The whole entire province can bank with Standard Bank. And then from there, we get to a local level. We've got municipalities, district municipalities, metropolitan municipalities as well, forming part of our client base. And the last piece is the foreign entities. We actually have embassies, consulates, as also forming part of our client base. But now going back to the example you give around budgets, and that's the kind of work that we do on an annual basis. Once budgets are published, we have to understand them. So sometimes it's not even about them to coming to us to ask us to support those projects. It's about us identifying those projects through intentional, activities that we embark on to try and understand and unpack these budgets. And from there, we identify these projects. Then we approach the entities and say, we see for this financial year, you've got 1, 2, and 3 budgeted for. And how can we as an organization partner with you? Of course, after that, clients would have their own internal processes from a tender all the way to appointment that they would follow.
Which I guess was my next point as well. You mentioned tenders and that sort of thing, because that's all part of, infrastructure lending and liquidity management. How do those particular initiatives, how do they fit into the banking model?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, often when I talk to my colleagues about the work that we do, they find it quite fascinating. My team and I, have signed up for tender advertisement platforms. We get notified when a municipality goes out on tender for either banking services or a loan or investment. And there's a team behind the scene that would sit and unpack that, package it together, and we actually go to tender briefings and so forth. And eventually, we submit, and of course, our clients then would then assess us against all other competitors. And if we are successful, then we embark on a contract. So our relationships with our clients are pretty much contract-based.
Wow.
Because they follow that tender process.
Do you guys mirror what you do here for government, local government, in other countries across the continent? I imagine you offer the same services there as well.
No, absolutely.
How do they compare to South Africa? I mean, obviously the scale is different in every country, and infrastructure development, etc., is very different. But how do countries compare to us?
So the difference really is probably in how you organize yourself, right? Based on the local nuances.
Yes.
So in South Africa, we've organized ourselves in a particular way because we appreciate the opportunities, the size of the opportunities that are in the market. But to your point, yes, we are present in almost all our 20 countries across Africa. Public sector is there. Obviously, there would be nuances, differences, legislation, and so forth. But, business is definitely taking place in the likes of Eswatini and Botswana, really solving for government and its needs, as well as impacting lives as well.
That's fascinating. Something I'm very passionate about is SME development.
Yeah.
And although it kind of sits in a certain sector of the banking portfolio, it's a very important role that it plays economically. And I would imagine, from the public sector point of view, it's very important because these SMEs contribute immensely, and there are those thriving communities. And without SMEs, our economy wouldn't be where it is.
Absolutely.
So how does that fit into, public sector and your particular portfolio?
Yeah, so absolutely, and you're quite right. we have to be deliberate about that. In engaging with all our clients, you will never have a conversation without touching on how you support SMEs, because that is at the core of any government entity. So we work with our clients to understand the opportunities they have available for the SMEs. From there, we connect the SMEs with, after they've gone through their processes and they are appointed, with meaningful solutions to help them deliver. So it can be a normal course of business where a person applies for a loan, or sometimes through the enterprise and supplier development area, we are also able to say, how do we support that black-owned business that has got no access to funding to deliver on that purchase order for 100,000 or 200,000 rand, with the one intention. The intention is simply that once we've helped you get to that first opportunity, the second stage is about how we help you with non-financial solutions that you can sustain your operation, so that tomorrow you don't get the next opportunity and you still want the same amount or the same level of funding from an organization. How do we help you save money and also think about how you can preserve capital for your future opportunities?
Yeah. So enabling, inclusive economic growth is really critical in this whole picture. And that can only be done through very strategic partnerships with the public sector.
Yeah.
How does your philosophy translate into your work team, for example, and that reality on the ground as well? When you look at that philosophy and you say, we need to get that right as well, how does your team strategically do this?
Well, it's about, number one, being visible with our customers. We have very intentional customer engagement models that allows us to see every single customer in a structured way. We know who we want in front of that customer, and we also know what their agenda is, right? So if it's about understanding the strategic objectives of that customer, we'll make sure that we have that. But also, outside of just being visible at a local level, it's simply about the work that we do with other stakeholders within the sector. We annually participate in the likes of SIGFARO Conference, which is a platform for finance and audit practitioners in the sector, where they come together, discuss pertinent issues around the sector, as well as new initiatives that are coming up to solve for the challenges that the sector faces. We also work closely with the likes of National Treasury, because it's a strategic partner to ourselves. We're getting to hear how they think about local government, how they think about provincial government. It's important in shaping our approach in solving for this sector. The likes of South African Local Government Association, they are also a strategic partner of ours. We have ongoing discussions. So for me, making sure that we're visible not only to our customers, but to the entire sector and its role players. It's very, very important.
Timothy, it's actually been fascinating chatting to you, because when you talk about the public sector, it's actually it's a multi-layered environment. There's lots of pieces to that. You're not just dealing with a municipality or a provincial stakeholder, etc. No, just below there's SMEs. There's so many different stakeholders, and there's lots of layers to it. So I can understand how you need to operate in this environment. It sounds quite complex, but it's almost like all these pieces of the puzzle have to fit together for it to work successfully.
No, absolutely. And it's the impact cannot be quantified in just looking at the numbers from a portfolio point of view. It's an economic impact that we need to measure. If we are able to solve for that infrastructure project for that municipality, small businesses and big businesses in that local community benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is the nature of our work. And when they benefit and they grow, they employ more people. And households also get to benefit. So I think government needs to be strategically partnered with in a way that they are able to, execute effectively on their mandate so that this country can grow and economy can improve. But it's not going to take a bank like ours to change this environment. Everybody needs to come to the picture.
Yeah.
Like, everybody must be willing to collaborate and make it work.
Yeah, let's talk about those opportunities and the collaborations,
Yeah.
because it sounds to me like there's lots of opportunities. We've got a lot of work in the country to do, and of course that translates into many, many opportunities. So how do you see these opportunities unfolding for the public-private collaboration in South Africa?
Yeah. So just yesterday we heard about phase 2 of Operation Vulindlela.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, for our conversation, that phase 2 is focused on local government, how we get the reforms going. So that opportunity for me is around us showing up and supporting those reforms. If those reforms involve the appointment of utilities as it is envisaged, it's about how we show up as well as an organization to support them so that they can execute on their deliverables, ultimately making sure that Vulindlela becomes a success, because ultimately this is what is going to see us grow and improve. So the second thing is also about making sure that we can walk the journey with our local municipalities through different phases. It's very disheartening to learn about AG or Auditor General's audit outcomes. Last report, edified that there's about only 34 municipalities with clean audits. I mean, out of 257 municipalities. So the other piece of work that we are on about is to make sure that those that do not have clean audits and those that have got challenges today, and it might not be a short-term type of deliverable, but we have to demonstrate our support today as an organization. We're working with some of these entities to make sure that we can slowly but get them to improve in areas that we are experts in,
Yes.
but also get them to understand that if you want to get yourself ready for access to funding from a commercial bank, this is what you ought to do today, that in the next 5 years you are also able to access these opportunities, because it is only through these other additional support that you can expedite some of your infrastructure projects and able to then improve the economy at a local level.
Yeah, it's the same like individuals. You go to the bank with a loan, they check your credit record. If you haven't behaved well financially, you're not going to get the credit you want.
Yeah.
So you're saying clean up those audits. And yes, they are very complex businesses. I talk about
Absolutely.
public sector, it's complex. There's a lot of stuff happening over there. But get those audits cleaned up. There's a lot of people watching this that are, in the public sector. There are leaders in the public sector in one way or another. What's your message to those people that are watching this particular conversation that we're having? And how do they actually get hold of you guys at Standard Bank to say, listen, we need your help. We want this, we want that. What's your message to them, and how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, so I think my message would simply be that, as public sector leaders, your work is really about restoring hope and really improving the livelihoods of the citizens. And at Standard Bank, we just don't see you as clients, but we see you as partners. And through this partnership, we want to be able for you to bring your own mandate with full understanding and appreciation of that mandate. And we also bring in our support and see how collectively we improve this country in a meaningful way, so that next time we're able to really take pride in how Standard Bank and its clients overall have been able to improve local government, provincial government, and government as a whole, because ultimately it is you and I that get to benefit from such interventions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We are available on our website. Our contact details are there for our local public sector managers. I would urge everyone to just go and search public sector. You will be able to be connected with a local individual that would solve for your local challenges.
Yeah, and specifically a specialist in that, that
Absolutely.
you guys have got such detailed specialization in your department,
Yeah.
whether it's education, healthcare, etc. Fantastic. Well, Timothy, listen, it's been great chatting to you. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming to the My Broadband studios, and it's been a pleasure hosting you. And I hope to have a conversation with you again in the near future to say that, listen, the public audits and the compliance of municipalities, that report that you spoke about, it's improved by 50%. And they've got clean audits now, which is ultimately what we want to do, because if it works efficiently, it unlocks value in all sorts of different sectors. Thank you very much for your time. It's Timothy Matlala joining us here at the My Broadband studios. He heads up the public sector department at Standard Bank South Africa, talking to us about the work that Standard Bank is doing in the public sector and how important that public sector is to the economy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Aki, for having me.